Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Greater Limpopo Transfrontier Park here in the southern reaches of the great continent of Africa. Over to the east, where the sun is rising, it's coming up over the Limpopo National Park in Mozambique, which flows seamlessly into the Kruger National Park and north into the Sengwe Corridor and Gonara Zoo in Zimbabwe. 3 countries, one great wilderness area of over 5 million acres. In fact, about 7 million acres. 3.5 million hectares, and we're on a small piece on the western edge of it called Juma or Arathusa, which is 900 for Juma and 600 for Arathusa off to the west of us. Sorry, I'm just listening to a few things going on around here at the moment. You are most welcome. You're with WildEarth TV. If you've happened to have stumbled upon this website by mistake, please remain with us. Grab yourself a coffee or tipple of choice and enjoy it and watch. You're on a live dawn safari. My name is James Hendry. Behind the camera we have Willem the Wildebeest. There is his thumb. Willem has brought himself a substantial picnic array today, including crisps, yogurt in an enamel mug, and a vast cup of coffee / hot chocolate. He's looking fairly pleased with himself at this stage. On the other vehicle we have Scott and the inimitable Andrew the Aardvark, aka Freddie Mercury, and in the control room we have Kirsty and the sultry tones of Nikki Austin. She is telling me what to do in my ear as we speak. Our plan this morning, everybody, is to head. Scott has gone off to the east where he heard some lions calling, so that's where he's gone off looking. We checked the hyena den this morning. There's no one there. The hyenas apparently have been calling around Juma Waterhole. Thank you, Lucy, in South Bend, Indiana, for that. They also made a raid on our camp last night, fossicked about in the rubbish dump, which was quite disconcerting this morning when we had to wade through it all and repackage it into our rubbish tip. But that is what hyenas do, really. Scott was nearly accosted by one last night. Not accosted so much as run past during the night as he disturbed them. They tend to be gangsters in the night time. We are going to go off to the west now to Arathusa and see what's going on that side. And basically, it's a fresh morning, a fresh story of the night is unfolding on the roads, or has unfolded on the roads, and we're going to follow up on the most exciting aspects of that. If you have any questions for us, please, we love to hear from you. Questions at wildearth.tv on the email, or hashtag Safari Live if you're on Twitter. If you're a new viewer, or you're a regular viewer who's never asked questions, perhaps for fear or trepidation, don't worry about it. Please do, if you have any questions at all, we love to hear from you, so please send them through. New viewer, or perhaps a viewer who hasn't asked questions, and of course our regulars, please keep sending them through too. Thank you, you're most welcome. Here we go into the African wild. We're at a little waterhole called not Twin Dams, called Tree House, and nothing is drinking at Tree House at the moment. It is a fairly chillsome 7 degrees Celsius or 44 degrees Fahrenheit. Not as cold as we thought it was going to be. Last night there was a big front coming through and it was very windy and pretty unpleasant really come the end of our fireside chat. We all rushed inside afterwards and we thought today would be quite a lot colder than it probably is. A large amount of buffalo here yesterday afternoon, buffalo bulls in the bachelor herd. Willem will be very pleased that they are not here anymore. He is not a particular fan of buffalo. Not so, Willem. He's just looking at me with daggers. So we're just going to do a little bit of a stop further up here, and I just want to try and have a listen to the dawn chorus, which is still in its sort of winter state, and that means that it's pretty quiet. So Let's just stop here. There's a Natal Franklin there. Jumpy. We can have a look at him. One of 5 Franklin species that we get here. That's probably one of the rarest. The Natal Franklin, I think it's one of the most beautiful too. It's orange-pink legs and grey head, and they come out in the mornings and they fossick about looking for seeds. They'll eat insects too. You'll see him probably looking in that dung. Yeah, looking in the dung to see if he can find insects that might be there. But grass seeds in the summer will form the bulk of their diet. They've got a fairly unattractive call, the Natal Franklin, which I'm not going to try and emulate because it will ruin the peace of the dawn. So I'm just going to tell you what I can hear around me now. I can hear crested franklins calling way in the distance. I did hear a southern black tit earlier. There were some waxbills calling and 1 or 2 grey-headed sparrows. Now, you can't hear them where you are, I'm sure. They're quite far away. And the winter dawn chorus tends to be a much quieter affair than the summer. And, ooh, look at the sun. We'll give you a quick view of the sun now as it pops up over the horizon. So the winter chorus is very subtle. It's a very kind of underlying, it's a comforting little song of the morning, but it's not a great big symphony like it tends to be in the middle of the summer. I'm just going to flip around so that you can see the sun. Right, Leon. And there you can see the sun just peeping up over the horizon. It's just kind of blasted the horizon with a volcanic golden light. Oof, that's stunning. There it comes. Look at that. Wow, that's a comforting sight. Never get sick of that. It looks almost as good on your screens as it does to my naked eye. Except, of course, with the fact that you can look at your screen without kind of seeing blotches for the next hour. Beautiful. That's a silver cluster leaf that it's rising behind. Hello, Anne in San Francisco. You want to know about the dawn chorus we were just talking about, and whether the Natal Franklin, which we stopped to look at, calls as much as the crested Franklin. And they don't call as much. They're not as common either. And their call is as loud, but it's not quite as rhythmic. It's just a kind of loud squawk. Again, like I say, I'm not going to emulate it for fear of ruining the peace, but they certainly do call, yes. But all around you can hear the Natal Franklin calling. There's also some grey go-away birds. Quack, quack. Some hornbills. There's a pearl-spotted owl. Hello, Jane in Dallas. As we sit here in this relatively chilly morning, you'd like to know when our spring weather starts. Well, spring officially starts, of course, on the 1st of September here, but we'll find that the end of August will probably be pretty hot, and September is very hot. So, I mean, things are going to start to warm up basically from the beginning of August. Yeah, it's still pretty wintry at the moment. We had, I think, one of our coldest nights last night, but there's definitely an element of expectation in the air. And 2 days ago, we had a strangely warm breeze blowing through the area, possibly heralding the end of the winter season. And the mornings are definitely getting much lighter. It doesn't change quite like it does in the northern hemisphere. We get about a 30-second change a day, and I mean in the height of summer, it only gets light at what, sort of 5:30, and then in the and dark, always dark by 6:45, 7 o'clock at night. But in the winter time, it doesn't change that much. But it is changing a little bit now. And then a question from Shawnee and Purple Rain and a few others. I had a bathe yesterday in a water hole in the mud, and they want to know how my skin feels. Well, not particularly good, I have to tell you. You know, that mud is used extensively by buffalo, rhino, and elephant to pull ticks off their bodies, and I didn't really understand how that worked until yesterday. Yesterday I lost quite a lot of hair on the bottom of my legs. As that mud dries, it is incredible how it contracts and holds whatever's on your skin, pulling it off your skin. And that's basically why it's so effective as a tick repellent for those animals, for those buffalo and rhino and elephant. And they then go and rub the mud off on trees, and they lose their ectoparasites in such a way. I haven't rubbed my legs against a tree to get rid of ectoparasites. I'll do that probably off camera a bit later. Right, we're going to go across to Scott now and get an update from him. He went east and south to see if he could follow up on some lions that were shouting early this morning. I suspect they're further south of us than we hope they will be, but let's go and check in with him, and I'll see you a bit later.
Hello everyone, and welcome on board with myself, Scott. And look at this beautiful morning, as I'm told James has already been sharing some wonderful views of the sunrise this morning, and also been letting you know a little bit about how his legs are feeling. I couldn't believe it when he arrived at the fireside chat last night. I literally thought he had put a pair of stockings on, and then only worked out what he had been doing a few seconds later. Anyway, we have been very slowly freezing ourselves on this morning's safari. It's bitterly cold, much colder than the last week or so has been. And Andrew and I came to the southern boundary in the hope that we would find some lion tracks, but we heard audio of them calling, and it must have been slightly further south of our southern boundary, so no luck with them, but that's not a problem because there's lots of other animals out here. And we're now continuing along, checking our eastern boundary. For any tracks or signs, we stopped here for a few moments just to warm up. It's incredible how cold you get with these open vehicles, even when you are just crawling along. And because we had been driving the whole morning except for one short break, excuse me, we decided to stop, warm up a little bit, and listen. Listen can often be one of the most successful tools to use when looking for animals, morning or afternoon. And as we drive along our eastern boundary, there's a chance we may find various animals' tracks coming in and out of the property, one of which may be the Nkuhuma Pride, who were last seen heading away from us. So if they do come back, they will in all likelihood cross over this road. And I'm told Angie from Ohio would like to know if we know where they could be. And there's been no further reports of them after them being found in Coral, further to the east yesterday. But with a bit of luck, they may have returned onto Djuma, and that's what we're hoping to find along this road, Angie. Either them or, who knows, possibly tracks of mvula, a large male leopard. And there have been a few cheetah sightings in this general area over the last few weeks. And this road is actually called Cheetah Cut Line. And I've just heard an update from Craig on the radio saying that 2 Matimba males, as well as some of the Styx lioness, have been found, but they are further to our east. So that's possibly who we heard calling this morning from camp. I'm hoping to see either mvula or karula today. It's been quite some time since we've seen those two, and maybe we'll get lucky this morning. There hasn't been any confirmed sightings of either of them for quite some time now, so maybe they've been busy finishing off kills that they've made in areas where we did not manage to locate. So that can take 2 or 3 days, and if you don't find them on the kill, then like I say, you would have lost them for about 2 or 3 days until they finish it. This is quite a busy highway where the Nkahuma Pride either leave or come in. And this morning, there's some zebra here. I've moved a little bit into the bush, but Andrew's hot on his trail. Look at how beautiful this is with the sun rising in the background. Magic. I heard a strange noise behind us. I just want to try and work out what it was. It almost sounded like a buffalo grunting. Not bellowing in distress, just talking buffalo to other buffalo. We'll creep forward a little bit. As I said earlier, it's colder than it has been over the last few weeks, but we have been experiencing mornings as cold, sometimes even slightly colder than this. And Reese would like to know, how cold exactly can it get here? It's very seldom frosts in the Sabi Sand, so it's very, very rarely below zero. So we're fortunate in that. But the wind chill factor from the vehicles, Reese, can make it very, very cold. So that contributes and compounds how cold the weather actually is, because we're driving in these open vehicles. But usually the lowest it would be about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, whereas this morning it's about 7. Let's take a closer look at these zebra. And while we do, I can continue listening and trying to work out what this noise is that I'm hearing. We're quite lucky. There's a lot of zebra around at the moment. Their numbers ebb and flow. over the seasons. But I think at the moment we're seeing more than we've seen since we started filming in November. I can hear the buffalo more clearly now. There's definitely buffalo nearby. I'm just trying to pinpoint where it is exactly. Oh, what a beautiful sight that was. And we've just got a question through from Sandy in Texas. Morning, Sandy. And it's one that I'd really like to clear up because I'm sure it's going to be applicable to a lot of you. Now, Sandy's been watching the show for quite some time, and she tells us she spends more time with us than her own family since she's been watching. So she would like to know if any of the Safari Live viewers come out on safari into the Sabi Sands. What are the chances of you guys meeting up with the WildEarth crew? And we'll certainly do whatever we can to ensure that we meet with you. Basically, the best possible plan for a meeting, which we would love to do, would be between the game drives. That way it doesn't impact on your safari time with whichever lodge you're staying at and whichever guide you are with. And because we usually head out a little bit earlier than the other vehicles in the afternoon, what we would suggest is you come to the WildEarth camp here at Djuma, and that way you get to meet all of us before we head out for afternoon drive, and you also get to see the final control room and how everything works there. So that is the kind of plan that we usually stick by, and we certainly will make a big effort to welcome you and meet you and show you around a little bit of the behind the scenes, the camp and the vehicles. And the best time to do that would be just before we headed out on an afternoon drive. And then your guide can just take you back to whichever camp you're staying at, and then you head out on your afternoon drive unaffected after having met us. So that is the plan, and we certainly will be as accommodating as possible when it comes to those meetings. It was just the other day that we met up with Brian and Gerda from, Brian was from Philadelphia and Gerda was from Belgium. They were both here at the same time, so that was a good example of how we will meet up with our viewers, and we certainly look forward to your trip out here. It really is great to actually meet you guys if it is possible. Finally I can see the buffalo and they're coming towards us. Good news. Apologies, I'm getting confused. There's a Gerda from Belgium, but it wasn't Gerda that we met, it was Catherine from Belgium. So Sandy, let us know when you're coming and we eagerly await your arrival. The buffalo are just off to the left where Andrew is aiming the camera, but it's a little bit thick and there's still a little bit of time before they reach us. But that doesn't matter because we found something else straight ahead of us. It's in between the two marula trees on the left of the road, and we're going to creep up to this giraffe. Well, let's just stay here with these with these zebra for now, and we'll catch up to the giraffe in a moment. They're nice and close now. They do have such bizarre colorations, these zebra. And Anne in Seattle is interested to know whether the stripes will mirror one another on either side of the body. And is it the same for leopards? No, it's not, Anne. The stripes aren't necessarily symmetrical on both sides of the body. And I'm just going to try and find an example of how we can show this to you. Actually, this one's a good example here. If you can see how the stripes don't kind of match up as she faces away. From her tail, the fourth stripe down, they aren't quite symmetrical. They do appear to be vaguely, but there are some big differences there. You can see one individual black stripe which runs off to the left of her rump, but it stops. It doesn't continue, whereas the one on the right continues all the way down. So they are not symmetrical, and neither are leopards. Similar, but not quite perfectly symmetrical. I'm just going to ask Andrew to zoom across to this giraffe now. Let's try and get to the giraffe quickly before it disappears, but it is going to be a beautiful scene as it walks down this road. Look at that. One of our taller supermodels on the catwalk. What we're going to do is we're going to try and get a little bit closer to the giraffe. The buffalo are still feeding towards us, so we are going to get to view them shortly, but thankfully we're in no rush to that. It looks like a fairly large herd, but hard to tell in this thick bush. I wonder if this female giraffe has some friends. Yes, she does, so we're in luck. I've just seen one more at least, and there could be more. What I would like to do is I'd like to show you some very, very fresh giraffe tracks of where the female we saw pacing down the catwalk has just been, and that way you'll know how to identify giraffe tracks. Oh, she's just run back across the road towards, oh, there's a lot of giraffes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you these tracks quickly first. So those tracks are about 6 inches long, and you can see there's 2 individual hooves that get placed on. There's a very slight line down the center of each track, and quite an oblong track that you can't really get confused with anything else. So there's your track and sign lesson for the morning. And now what we can try and do is get ourselves into a good position. I saw about 5 or 6 giraffe, I think. And we just need to get into a good spot to show them to you now. Our supermodel friend's having none of it. She's running for cover. The giraffe are playing hard to get. And isn't it interesting how such a tall animal can hide away even when it's so close by? See if any of the ones that are further behind us are going to be a little bit more hospitable. Not looking promising, is it, Andrew?
No, it's not.
Okay, well, there's a bit of a gap of at least one over here, and what we'll do is we'll just be patient. And hopefully they'll relax and feed out towards us. The majority of them look to be like females, but I have seen one young male. Just need to update the guys that there is this herd of buffalo in the area in case anyone would be interested in showing their guests them. Is there a clump in? Yeah, I'm not sure if it's just my daughter's or how big it is, but it is mobile towards Cheetah Cut Line north of Central. Morning, Craig, go ahead. Copy, I didn't. Thanks very much for that update, Craig. Nikki, please inform James that Wild Dog on Arethusa and apparently heading east towards Zebra Drive. I'm not sure if he's on that channel yet. Okay, copy, thanks. Okay, folks, so you would have heard that little update, but I'll just reiterate it. A pack of wild dog have been found on Arethusa. James is in that general area, but there's a lot of people who would like to see the wild dog, and apparently there are already 8 people queuing up on standby to view them. So not looking hugely promising at this stage, but there is certainly hope that we will get to see wild dog this morning. And James is going to do his best to hustle his way into that sighting. But there's a limit of 3 vehicles per sighting, and there's already 8 people already waiting to join in after the initial 3 have viewed them. A negative, Craig. I think it headed back west last night. Okay, well, I'm not making Andrew's life easier, so we'll try and reposition. Well, some of you may have been watching on that sad morning drive where we discovered a zebra foal that had just been attacked by some stallions. It's had its back right leg broken. And Georgie and Dr. Debbie and a few others are not sure what the outcome was for that young zebra foal. We did return to that area about 2 hours after the morning broadcast finished, and already that zebra foal had been killed. We're not entirely sure whether the stallions came back and killed it, and then vultures and hyena arrived on the scene, or whether it was a hyena that came in and killed the zebra foal, but there was a lot of vultures and hyena footprints in that area. So thankfully it didn't suffer for very long. You sometimes do find that animals, even with very bad injuries, can somehow go without being detected by predators, which is not what you really want, because then the suffering is prolonged. But thankfully within a couple of hours that zebra had been put out of its misery. And not only that, it had helped whichever predators got to feed on it. So as sad as it is nature. And the death of any one animal is the life and well-being of another. So it's important to remember that out here. The carnivores do need to eat, and these easy meals don't come along all the time. Well, it seems like the giraffe, the buffalo, and the zebra all are not interested in coming out to show themselves to us, but we will get lucky eventually. Okay, well, because we're not having much luck here, we are going to hang around in this area until they do pop out, and then we'll call you back when they do. But James has found an animal busy feeding on some termites, probably thanks to a buffalo dropping. See you later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Jika. We're here on Arathusa and the light is just a magnificent contrast of gold and the clouds of dissipating it, and we're standing here watching some hornbills and some franklins, and there was a barbet, and they're all knocking about on the ground here. I think there must be some sort of termite emergence. We've got a red-billed and yellow-billed, those are two yellow-billed hornbills, and a crested franklin. And there's the there is also a crested barbet just knocking about to the right of us. Can you see him there? I don't know if you'll get him in your lens. I think there must be some termites here. In fact, I can see a few on the ground. You can see sort of some termite tunnels, and I'm sure that's what they're all going for now. So while these animals would normally eat, so a barbet's a fruit eater, they will normally eat fruit, but during this winter time they will go for some seeds and insects and whatever else they can find. Basically, this time of year is a free-for-all. Everybody's eating whatever they can find. He's a very pretty little bird, that crested barbet. Here he comes into the light. He's like a little clown. Pop, 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 pop. Pop, 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 pop. They're very beautifully colored birds. Lovely black and white and red and yellow and orange. And I suspect, that coloration in insects, for example, that coloration is called aposematic coloration. It's an indication of toxicity. I don't think that bird is toxic. In fact, we had a vicious house cat at one stage. It used to catch them fairly regularly in Johannesburg. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. But perhaps it's some kind of warning. Both male and female are exactly the same color. And normally in the colored birds like that, the males are more colorful than the females. And in the barbet, that is not the same. All the barbets, in fact, share some form of bit of red or yellow or orange. Not quite as spectacular as him, but males and females. Well, I think he's going to go up onto this termite mound. Predicting bird behavior is even harder than predicting mammal behavior, but let's see. He's going to move very slowly in my seat. Oh. He's there. He's there just behind us. I'll just go a little bit backwards. We don't often see them so beautifully like this. He's now being particularly irritated. You got him there, Bjorn?
Yeah, boy.
Behind a number of sticks, no doubt. No, there he is. So you can see that quite heavy bill as he sits there. That heavy bill is normally a fruit-eating bill, but as I say, come this time of the year, they'll pick up anything they can. Insects, are an important source of protein and fat for just about all the birds. So although some of them specialize on other things. When they're available, when there's a termite emergence, for example, lots of birds will try and eat the termites. You can just hear the beautiful call of the long-tailed or magpie shrike. There's some just over there. Okay, let's carry on from here, see what else Arethusa has to offer us today. It is clouding over a little, so I'm a little bit worried that the temperature won't warm up. Let's keep listening. They did find some wild dogs here on Arethusa this morning. They're in and around the area. Unfortunately, there are about 40,000 people trying to watch them, and so we can't go in there at the moment. They were heading east at our last update, and that means basically that they're heading towards Vuyatela. And if they go onto Vuyatela or Djuma, which is where we operate, we'll have a very good chance of seeing them, because a lot of the people that are following them and wanting to get in to look at them are in fact not allowed onto Djuma, which is quite nice for us. I suspect, however, that they're probably going to cross into Hoffman's, which is just south of Djuma. That's generally where they go. I think they have a den somewhere around Mala Mala on the boundary there, and that's probably what they'll do. But with any luck, we might be lucky we'll see them. I came across here with a specific intent of trying to see some wild dogs, so that's hopefully what we're going to do. Certainly one of my very favorite animals to see. And I wish you could hear the Game Drive radio going off in my ear. There is great excitement. Whenever dogs arrive, people rush in huge numbers to try and see them. The air is crystal clear today, and you can see that in the way the shadows contrast with the light, and we can see the mountains just off to, I'll try and get you a viewpoint of the mountains. It really is quite spectacular. Beautiful light, crisp winter morning. Hello, Jane in Colorado. I mean, while we're not looking at zebra, Scott was seeing some, and they've been obviously in the news of late. Jane, you want to know if their dentition is similar to that of domestic equids. And you said you may have seen a canine on one of them, on a skull. Jane, as far as I know and as far as I've seen, their dentition is very similar. I used to ride horses, so I'm fairly familiar with the dentition of the domestic horse. Yes, it's pretty similar. They don't have sharp canines at all. But exactly like the domestic horse, I don't know if you've ever been bitten by a domestic horse, they have incredibly strong jaws. It's very unpleasant to be bitten by them, and they've got very sharp incisors for cropping grass, top and bottom, more so than a lot of the other herbivores, which tend to have fairly flat bottom incisors and often just a pad at the top, just gum. The horses have got sharp teeth both in top and bottom, as do zebra, and they use that hugely in defense. Certainly when we watched that hapless foal being fairly mercilessly treated by the stallion the other day, he didn't kick the foal, he bit it. And that was his main form of attack. And so, yeah, absolutely very powerful teeth, very sharp incisors, but no sharp canines, no. Some impala through there. They weren't a very good view, I'm afraid, so I didn't impress upon Viam to point the camera at them. Right, we're going to go back across to Scott as we hopefully try and get into these wild dogs. I'm not going to guarantee anything though. He's got some giraffe, so we'll pop back across to him and I'll see you just now.
Well, we have a giraffe spying on us here, using the cover of a magic guarri bush to hide behind. And isn't this a funny view? We can see you there. It's the same journey of giraffe that we were watching earlier. And I really love the way you can chop and change between the two vehicles. And it sounds like you had a wonderful sighting of hornbills and a crested barbet. And now back to these massive animals. They don't look very big now because it's just their heads poking out. But they're probably around 4 meters in height, these individuals. They're not the biggest giraffe. It's females and young males we can see. And I'm told that you can see 3. Oh, there's a third one off to the right. You can see just vaguely. Now we haven't left because we still want to show you some visuals of the herd of buffalo. I think it is just a bachelor herd, but quite a large one of about 30 or 40 individuals. And they are feeding up towards us now. He's got a beautiful dark coat, look at that. I can still hear the herd of buffalo, but hard to pinpoint exactly where they are in this thick vegetation, but they were last seen heading towards us. So we've got giraffe, zebra, and buffalo all in this area. The buffalo are making quite a noise, so if there were any lion in this general area, they certainly would come in to investigate. So I'm keeping alert and checking around, making sure we don't get surprised by a pride of lion. That would be a very pleasant surprise, I guess, for us, not so much for all of the animals we're looking at now. Speaking of predators, there's two big cats that we haven't seen for quite some time. Two young male leopards, one called Quarantine and the other called Kunuma. And thankfully we can answer Gloria's question thanks to some useful intelligence sent through from Ellen. So morning to the both of you. And Ellen, thanks very much for sending through the report on the Kunuma male leopard, who was apparently seen around in Coral sometime yesterday. So Gloria, that's where he is, and I'm told you would like to see Q, Gloria, Kunuma's brother. I'm not too sure where he is, but they are both spending time to the south and east of us. So they are still in the Sabi Sands, which is great because they could have headed further north from here into the Manyeleti, where we wouldn't be able to keep track of them. Oh, I can hear buffalo stampeding. Let's go and have a closer look there. I'm not sure what would have caused that. The giraffe don't seem too concerned, but I did hear a lot of hooves running through the bush. Did you hear that, Andrew? Yeah. So I'm not sure what would have caused them. They may have just got a little bit of a fright and chased one another around. And just around this next corner we should get a good view of them and be able to establish what exactly is going on. Just want to make sure there's no tracks of any predators heading towards them. They could have possibly chased an animal like a leopard. So there could be a predator here, but just not a lion or something that would chase the buffalo, something that the buffalo would possibly chase instead. Or, like I said earlier, I think it could be a bachelor herd of buffalo, so it's maybe just some old boys having a tussle with one another. What have you guys seen? Oh no, it's certainly not a bachelor herd. It's a breeding herd of all different shapes and sizes. Look at this. What did you guys see? You can almost see the dust still settling from where they were running. And interestingly enough, it's not uncommon for large male leopards to trail these big herds of buffalo, hoping to try and snipe a young calf from the herd, and it does happen from time to time. Wouldn't it be great if we found a Mvula here somewhere now? This is his territory. Look at all these buffalo. Wonderful. Lots of oxpeckers and starlings calling. What a beautiful morning this is. Now you'll notice the vegetation is very dry, and Anna Maria is asking, how difficult is it becoming for all the herbivores to find food? And quite considerably difficult, Anna Marie. And it's this time of the year that a lot of old or weak animals will really lose condition quickly because there isn't much food around and there's less food than normal. We had a very dry season in terms of rainfall over our last summer, and that's caused for testing times for the herbivores, and it'll continue to be a couple of months before the first decent rains fall in around October or November, so it will continue to get even harder for all of them. But it's important to know that drought cycles are not uncommon, and they are almost necessary to keep herbivore numbers down. It's Mother Nature's way of making sure that it's not always a bounty year, because then populations would get too high and the ecosystem will no longer be able to sustain all the hungry mouths. And in the same breath, by making it hard for the herbivores every now and then, it makes life a little bit easy for the carnivores, which is a useful change in tide, as they will have easy meals to pick off. Well, what a beautiful morning it is, and it's so good to have all of you with us. I'm thinking of possibly trying to loop ahead of these buffalo. Let's get a little bit further forward and see how much of the herd still has to pass, and then we may loop back onto Gwari Pan Road. I wonder if we're going to be able to pick up that dust there, Andrew. Look at that cloud of dust being kicked up by the herd of buffalo in front there. This is awesome. It's not easy to see, but you can see that haze, and that is entirely due to hundreds of hooves of buffalo churning up the dry ground. Wonderful. A few more crossing over the road here, and we've got a good question through from Chris in Oregon. He's trying to work out who is in charge of determining where these large herds of buffalo go. There's obviously so many of them that is there a leader? Is it the males or the females? It's actually the females that control these large breeding herds of buffalo, and a term that's been given to the team or committee of older females who lead the herd is a term called the pathfinders. And that's what they do. They basically determine which direction the herd shall move in terms of feeding and water. And it's a committee of ladies. We're not sure how many are on any given herd, but it does depend obviously on the individual herd. This large herd that we're seeing here could have maybe 10 or 15 ladies who jointly combine their thoughts into where they think the herd should go next. The large herds of buffalo do need to move large distances for a few reasons. They often have lions following them, so that's always a continual pressure that causes them to move. And there's also hundreds of mouths to feed. So unlike the smaller herds of buffalo bulls that are kind of semi-retired, that can stay in small areas and still acquire enough food for themselves, large herds need to move big distances because there's so many hungry mouths to feed. So they do move big distances, and it's the ladies who make those decisions. Good news, folks. James is still hanging on to the chance and the hope that there will be a wild dog sighting that he can share with all of you. He's slowly getting higher up the queue, and stick around because there are such wonderful animals to follow. A lot of excitement and speeding around as they move huge distances and quite quickly through the bush. So it can be quite tricky to follow them. And the first thing that I tell my guests when I am heading into a wild dog sighting is that they need to hang on for dear life, because you sometimes have to race around a bit quicker than you normally would, and you would hate one of your guests to be flung out the vehicle. It does happen. So that's something to remember when you do come out on safari, if ever. If you get into a wild dog sighting, make sure your valuables are safely stowed away and that you are holding on tightly. Interesting question through from Mischian in Dallas, and you must have been watching a few days ago when we saw the buffalo with the freshly broken horn that was bleeding quite profusely, and you've mentioned that you didn't realize that the horns would be so vascular, and it's true, you wouldn't think that they would be. However, they are growing and they continue to grow throughout an animal's life, and therefore they do need blood and oxygen to be fed into those horns in order for them to grow. So it's that bony inner that will indeed have blood and veins feeding onto them. Okay, we're going to send you across to James. It sounds like he's in a good spot. Enjoy the wild dog. I wish I was coming with.
Hi everybody, I don't know if we're going to get a good sighting. Just look down the road there, you can see the dogs. They are running around. We have been called in. I just don't, there's too much pressure on them at the moment, so I'm going to wait and see if they don't come on to Weirtella, which is to our left, and to the right is another reserve. So we'll carry on along here and we'll hopefully get a view. I'm sorry about this, everybody. It's not a wonderful view at all, but you can just get an impression of the continent's second most rare carnivore. They're just through there, and there are just too many vehicles, I'm afraid, for me to go in there right now. As you can see, it looks like it's it's a little bit like some sharks circling the prey. So we'll try and go a little bit closer now. It does seem that there is a bit of space opening up there. So we'll move in there. It's so special to see them. They really are the most magnificent predators we have out here. Oh, there we go. We've got some space now. They're probably going to head south from here, I'm afraid. At least we've had a view. I haven't seen them for so long. Oh, there we go. Isn't that wonderful? 1, 2, 3. 10 of them, it seems. Isn't that spectacular? Oh, these are just, in fact, they're definitely my favorite. This is just wonderful. So worth the wait. It's so worth the wait to see these animals. They just don't care, despite all of the immense pressure that they've experienced today. They just don't mind. And what's so interesting to me, you know, is that where lions will move around all the time, leap about the place, lions will not move around. These guys are seldom ever static. They're always running around, playing, fiddling. It's just wonderful. And until recently, there were only 250 left in the Kruger National Park, and along with huge amounts of help from the public who've made a massive effort to photograph them and check what's going on with them. They think they're back up to about 400 now, which is wonderful. But like I said, it's still highly endangered. Only about 3,000 left in the world. 2,500 actually. A lot of them in Botswana. I don't know if you heard that, but apparently they did kill earlier this morning an impala. And they've got a den site probably on Mala Mala, which is quite a long way south of here, and that's why I'm so worried that they're going to, well, not worried, but I think they're probably going to head off to the south there, exactly like they're doing now, and head back to the den site. That might be it, everybody, but what a wonderful privilege to spend a little bit of time with them. So exciting. I think that is going to be it, but at least we got to see them. Wasn't that really special? Yeah, I can just see them filtering down through the bush there, and I don't think we're going to get another view, I'm afraid. But I'm so happy to see them. It's been so long. Because they have a den, they don't come onto here anymore so much. I'm really privileged to see them. Thank you very much. And they very kindly opened up a space, because these guys can drive down on here and we can't, and they very kindly opened up a space so that we could come and see them. What a privilege that was. We'll sit here for a little bit longer and see if they don't perhaps pop out, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to. I'm pretty sure that that's it. They're heading back to the den. They'll feed the little ones, and of course what they do is that they eat a huge amount of impala, and then they swallow it up and take it home and regurgitate it for the youngsters, and that's basically how they operate. It doesn't sound like a great breakfast to me, but I don't really care now that I've managed to see them. Just sad that I won't be able to follow them for a bit longer. Anyway, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to press on and see what else we can see. And that strange car that you can see driving past us, there are obviously some guests from one of the lodges, and they've just driven themselves in. I'm not sure why they didn't go on morning game drive, but normally what they do is leave between game drives. So it's just a bit of an unfortunate thing that they've managed to bump into a wild dog sighting. Not for them, of course, but for everybody else. Anyway, that's how it goes out here. Tourism is a massively important part of what we do out here, and so we appreciate their being here, just perhaps not in the wild dog sighting. Right, that's the dogs, everybody. Well done. Well done for your patience. I feel a great sense of excitement, I must say. So they're heading south towards their den. We're going to head back north onto WildEarth. The state of the radio, there's so many people operating on Arathusa at the moment that the volume of the radio is just so high that I can't deal with it anymore. So, Remy on Twitter, you want to know basically exactly where is their den. I couldn't pinpoint it with a GPS, I'm afraid, but I know that it is on Mala Mala. So, but Mala Mala, if you can think of it, we're at Dumas here, the next one is Hoffman's, and the next property down is Mala Mala. It's only about probably, it's about a kilometre as the crow flies to the Mala Mala boundary. Mala Mala, of course, an iconic name in South African ecotourism history, and that just happens to be where they've denned this year. And another one about, we're going to have probably a few questions on wild dogs. Edward, you want to know how long till the pups actually leave the den. I'm going to assume that they were probably born about 3 weeks ago, sort of beginning of July. That's the most typical time. It may have been a little bit earlier than that, but probably 3 weeks ago. They won't come out of the den and start following the pack until they're probably about 3 months old. But they will start making forays out of the den from about 6 weeks. and they will move the den every 2 weeks or so, every 10 days to 2 weeks. And the little ones will come out of the den at this stage, and they'll beg from the mothers, and they'll be in and around the den probably for almost 3 months. Whew. Wonderful. Brenda in Virginia, you want to know, is this the half-tail group? Brenda, I'm not sure. I don't know that, I haven't spent enough time with the dogs of this area to know them exactly. I know that there are 2 packs. I'm going to stop right here. And while I answer the question, Viam is going to point the camera just over the incredible view we have there of the mountains. Brenda, basically, it could be the half-tail group. There's one other group that hangs around here. And you say that you saw some mess or some redness on the side of one of their faces. Absolutely, that's probably from the hapless impala that they would have devoured this morning. That magnificent view. And of course, wild dog, when they eat, it's a fairly unpleasant thing to watch if you happen to be a human being with any form of table manners. It's not nice. It's a very quick death for the prey species, but it is a pretty brutal death. The animal tends to get ripped limb from limb very quickly. Oh, that's stunning. Look at that. Get ripped limb from limb and devoured. I mean, a pack that size of 10 adults like that would have devoured an impala in probably 10 minutes. There wouldn't have been anything left within 10 minutes, and then they run off like that, and eventually they'll regurgitate quite a lot of it for the pups. So, there can be up to 12 or 13 pups in a litter, and so there are some very hungry mouths trying to be filled. Just in the far right-hand side of your corner there, you can see a koppie or outcrop. You can see 3 of them in a line, and those lead toward a place called Tulila Mahash, and in front of them, I think it's probably the front one there, Ulusaba resides, and Ulusaba is Richard Branson's lodge in the area. And it's on one of those koppies, I think probably the one closest to us. And the others head towards what used to be the capital of the Shangan kingdom, and that was called Tulila Mahash. I tell you, seeing the dogs does get the adrenaline up, gets the heart pumping. So we'll start to see dogs more and more, once they have left the actual den and the youngsters are moving with the pack. Then they'll start to come on, spend a bit more time here. Terry in Santa Ana, a nice question about the wild dogs and why they are so endangered. Terry, it's a good one. Remember, they're the second most endangered carnivore in Africa. The first being the simian wolf, or the Ethiopian jackal. It's the same animal that lives in the Ethiopian highlands. These are endangered for a number of reasons. Firstly, they were persecuted for many years by people. They were seen and shot as vermin because they were seen as a threat to cattle and sheep and other forms of domestic animal husbandry, which is, look, if you come into a wildlife area with sheep, you must expect to have the odd stock loss, I think. So that's basically one of the major reasons why their numbers initially dwindled quite fast, because you can see they're extremely effective hunters. They're about 70% successful in their hunts when compared with lions, which only achieve about a 30% success rate. So they really are very effective. The other thing is introduction of domestic dog diseases like rabies and canine distemper. Canine distemper apparently wipes out a lot of the pups at a very early age. Dogs are almost impervious to fences, these wild dogs. So they will cross the fences, they go under them, through them, around them. I don't know how they do it, sometimes over them, I guess. if their fence is not in 100% good nick, and I mean the size of the Kruger National Park fence makes that almost impossible, these wild dogs do go into domestic areas. They come across domestic dogs, or certainly where domestic dogs have been, and although they certainly can't interbreed, they're a totally different genus, and they will pick up some of the diseases that those dogs get and then bring them back into the reserve. And so they don't tend to survive outside of reserve areas. There are too many people here. They would probably be killed, but they do sometimes make forays outside, come back and bring diseases in. And the pups obviously have got no natural resistance to domestic dog diseases like canine distemper. Rabies to a certain extent also affects them. If there's a rabies outbreak in the communities, which sometimes there is because the veterinary services are very poor, and then that comes into the reserve. I've seen an incident like that. It's very unpleasant and can happen. Then that will also affect wild dog numbers. Without persecution and without human intervention and without the presence of human beings or large concentrations of human beings, wild dog numbers would be fine. They'd be okay, and I think they'd probably pick up quite nicely. Unfortunately, there are just quite a lot of people all over the world, really, and in Africa as well. And a lot of those people are very poor. A lot of those people don't have veterinary services, so their dogs maintain a horrific suite of diseases, which they then pass on to the wild dogs. So that's basically why they're endangered, and they have been for a long time. Numbers are pretty stable at the moment, I think, but they're certainly not going up at the rate that we'd like them to. Healthy population in this area, 2 packs using this area, which is fantastic. I'd say we see them about as often as you'd expect to anyway. But that's basically to answer the question of why they're endangered. That's it. Marvelous. Okay, let's press on and see if we can find any other tracks. And if you want to ask any more questions about the wild dogs, please keep them coming. Now we're just near the hyena den, which was devoid of hyenas this morning. It's quite interesting. Laura's asked the question, what would happen if a hyena pack came across a wild dog pack? Laura, I've seen it a few times, and it often happens when, when animals see wild dogs or any other predator, they start to alarm call, and that will, if there are hyena in the area, that will attract them. So I've seen it where wild dogs have made a kill, and hyenas have burst in there, and there's been a huge conflagration. And who wins depends entirely on the numbers. So it's probably about a ratio of 1.5 dogs to 1 hyena for there to be an equal match. Anything over that dog-wise, and the dogs will win, and anything under it, the dogs will be forced to retreat. Hyenas are bigger than wild dogs, and so they're a bit stronger, they're a bit stockier, and so in a fight they tend to one-on-one. You'd back a hyena to beat a wild dog. And the dogs know that, of course, but the dogs are quicker, faster, they communicate probably as a hunting pack a bit better than the hyenas do. And so it's always a massive conflagration with the dogs yelping and howling and the hyenas making that amazing cackling, loud, whooping sounds as they try and intimidate the dogs. So I've seen it a few times, and it just depends on how many of each there are. So 1.5 dogs to 1 hyena is probably the cutoff. Ruth, who's particularly observant, probably more so than I. Liam, did you see that? No. Ruth says she saw one of the dogs urinating on the other, and is this common behavior. Ruth, I've not seen it before. I suspect it's just, they're so excited that they don't tend to have the same sort of abhorrence to shall we say, waste products that we do, and so I suspect it was just excitement and one of them needed to go, and so it went. It may be maybe some kind of dominance display. I've certainly never seen it before. I'll watch out for it again though. Thank you, Ruth. Well spotted. An interesting question from Miss Jin in Dallas, Texas. And this is where the behavior of the dogs and the European or American grey wolf separates. In the wolf society, I believe it's a female, alpha female that leads. I think, maybe I'm wrong. But in the wild dogs, the alpha pair does lead the pack, alpha male and female, but it's the alpha male who leads the hunts. It's very clear when they're on the hunt, it's very clear who the alpha male is. He goes up onto the termite mounds and he looks, he gives the commands, and they all follow him. He's normally the biggest or oldest male and the most experienced one, and only he and the alpha female will breed. Sometimes a beta pair might breed, but normally then what happens is that the alpha female will kill those pups or kidnap them and raise them as her own. So it's definitely the alpha male that leads the hunt and leads the pack, and the alpha pair tends to be hierarchically stronger than all the others. Hi Katrina, lovely question about the number of pups that may or may not have been born. Katrina, I don't know exactly to this pack. The average number is normally sort of between 8 and 14. I've seen as many as 15 in one litter. It's very unlikely that they'd all survive though. I think you'd probably say that 50% of them will die within the first 8 months. So between that number, 12 is quite common. And so I don't know how many there are exactly in this litter. But we can try and find out, certainly. You see, none of the guys here are allowed onto Mala Mala, and so they won't have any real idea as to how many there are. But we can certainly get hold of Mala Mala and try and find out how many pups there are. And you know, they might move that den. They're not going to move it this far north, unfortunately, yet. But they may move it onto Hoffman's. Hello, Ron in Scotland. You just want to know about that private vehicle that I mentioned as it came past the sighting, and I seem to indicate that it wasn't welcome in the sighting. Ron, I just, no, I don't think it would have affected the wild dog's behavior at all. Their habituation to vehicles, I think, doesn't extend to sort of noticing the difference between a Land Rover and a commercial car like that. The only thing was that there were already 3 or 4 Land Rovers in and around the sighting, so the extra pressure is not ideal, and obviously it's not very nice for us to see. We're in a wild area, and to see a domestic car driving through the middle of the sighting is just not particularly attractive.
As opposed to a feral car.
As opposed to a feral car, isn't it? We're in feral cars, as VM says. He thinks he's very clever, does the wildebeest now, after that comment. He's grinning happily to himself. Beautiful scene. Right, so Edward had made the comment that this is the clearest picture of the mountains he's ever seen. Shall we stop here, Bill? And we're not going to look at the mountains because they're off in the other direction. He says they're normally very hazy, and they are indeed. We had, remember that wind last night? I don't know if any of you were with us for the fireside chat, but there was a wind blowing and all the way through Game Drive. And those cold fronts that was coming through here, or the beginnings of, generally do clear the air. They blow away the dust and the smoke. Remember, there are 9 million people living along the western boundary here. Most of them very poor, so most of them using wood for heating and for cooking. And that's why it's quite hazy during this time of year especially. And now, as fire season approaches, it'll probably become even more hazy. So beautiful, clear picture of the mountains this morning because of the cold front that's come through. We're going to go across to Scott now. He's at Buffelshoek Dam. I'm not sure what he's got to show you, but we'll see you just a little bit later as we enjoy this crystalline, clear, magnificent morning of wild dogs.
Well, I'm told you've had an incredible view of the Drakensberg Mountains, and I did get a glimpse of them earlier from Cheetah It certainly is a crisp and clear morning. And look at this for another beautiful view. We're here at the Buffelshoek Waterhole. And we came here just to double check there was nothing here, but we do hopefully think that the large herd of buffalo that we were watching earlier may well come and drink here. And if they do, it'll make for an incredible sighting. It'll give us a good opportunity to actually see how many of them there are. They were moving in this general direction, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a loop around and continue driving, see if we can find anything while they continue into this general area. What a wonderful, brief, but good sighting you had of those wild dogs. They're such awesome animals, and good to hear that they had a successful morning hunting. And glad that you got a glimpse. So well done to James for hustling to get you guys into the right place at the right time. Sounds like Texan and Aubrey are following up on some male lion tracks, which are apologies, I should have warned you about that little dip we just went. We sometimes lose in that low-lying area. Anyway, welcome back, and apologies for that. As I was saying, though, Texan and Aubrey are following up on tracks, possibly the Birmingham coalition of 5 male lions. They're not too far from us, but are north and east of where we are here, so they'll need to continue south and west about a kilometer or so before they get to us.
Hello everybody, welcome back. I think Scott's in a bit of a difficult area, so that's why you lost him there. Never mind. What we're going to do is head up towards an area called Sandy Patch and see what we can find there. I haven't seen Mbula since I've been back, so I'm going to make it something of a mission to see if I can find his tracks. Mbula, for those of you who don't know, is a male leopard who we see quite often around here, or we certainly used to see quite often. I'm hoping that he's okay. I quite like him because he's not the biggest male leopard, but he's managed to make an exceptional living for himself in difficult conditions. And just as by way of update, Viam is on to his second breakfast bar of the morning. He has another one on standby, and this is after his yogurt of the early morning and of course large coffee and crisps. So question about whether or not people bring snacks on drive, well, some of us absolutely. You can see while it's quite clear that, you know, that the atmosphere is clear, there's definitely a front moving in. You can see the clouds starting to kind of scud over the top of us now, unfortunately blocking out the glorious sunlight and making it necessary for me to keep the blanket over my little leggies. Oh, Dennis in Spain. Dennis, thank you for your question and good morning to you. Buenos dias. I think you want to know, Dennis, basically you said Hoffman sounds like a private property, and how do you get hold of private property in this area? The first thing you need to have, Dennis, is a very giant bank account. If you have a very giant bank account, and by very I do mean very giant, the land in this area has been valued at about 70,000 Rand a hectare. So that's about, say, $7,000 US a hectare. And a hectare of land in this area is not a particularly huge amount of land. So, for example, there was a lodge put on the market the other day called Sabi Sabi. It's not on the market anymore, for 330 million. And then Mala Mala was recently sold for 1 billion Rand. Which is a substantial amount of money. So, Dennis, if you have assuming you have a giant bank account, your best bet would just be to keep your ear to the ground and get hold of a couple of the landowners in the area. Now, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to show you, Viam, can you just focus on a piece of the land here? And I'm going to draw you a map, basically, of the Sabi Sands. If you can find a clear piece of land. Is this all right?
Yeah, that'll work.
That'll work? Okay, so please excuse my artistic skills, which are extremely poor at the best of times. This is for you, Dennis. I'm going to take off that glove. Basically, Dennis, the Kruger National Park boundary, in fact, let me do it from that perspective. So you're looking north now. This is the western boundary of the Kruger National Park. Okay? The Kruger Park does this into Mozambique, and like that in South Africa. Is this correct? Yes, it is correct. And then the Limpopo Transfrontier Park into Mozambique does that. And then Gonarazu, which is in Zimbabwe, is over here. So this is Zimbabwe here, this is Mozambique here, and this is South Africa extending down towards Giga there. Now, the Sabi Sands is a piece over here, like that. And while this is all national park in the Kruger Park, the Sabi Sands is a number of privately owned reserves, one of which, of course, is Hoffman's. And, I mean, it's vaguely square like that. Ulusaba would be over there. Juma's up here in the north. And Hoffman's is there with Mala Mala just to the south. Mala Mala is a very big one that went for 1 billion rand the other day. So that's about, what's that? It's $100 million for this area, and the lodge on it, of course. It does have a very famous tourism lodge on it. But Hoffman's is a little piece over here. It's probably about 1,500, no, it's probably about 900 hectares. So if you multiply 9 by 7, what's 9 times 7? 63. So we're looking at about, what are we looking at there? Yeah? About 6.3 million, no. I'll work it out eventually in my head. So that's Hoffman's there. And Dennis, yeah, the only way to really buy them is if they come up for market, and they don't often come up for sale. And there is also, if you're part of the Sabi Sands, a big thing is to, there's a huge amount of, what do I mean? There are a number of families that own them, and so they tend to get passed down the generations. And when they do come up for sale, existing owners have first right of refusal on them. So Dennis, I'm afraid your chances of getting a piece of the Sabi Sands are fairly small. But there are some brilliant other wildlife areas all over the continent where you can get what we call a 99-year lease. Very few places you can still actually own land in Africa, especially as a foreigner. Anyway, that's the basic story of land ownership in the Sabi Sant Game Reserve. Just north of us on Buffelshoek, for example, Dennis, Buffelshoek is not very big. It's probably about 3,000 hectares. But they're probably, I think there are about 6 or 7 landowners that share it. And they've all got their homes, their private homes on the reserve, which they come to from time to time. And so they've got a much sort of smaller area than some of the bigger ones to the south, which if you're a private owner is ideal. It's not great if you're trying to run a lodge. Little bit of sun coming out, and you can hear the parrots calling. Preep, 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 preep. Okay, Liam has very kindly lent me his glove. I've stole one from Jean Bray for the other hand. Another wonderful crystalline view of the mountains there in front of us. So very interesting update from Ross. And apparently he's picked up from the Mala Mala Facebook page, oh, lots of birds going on here. There's a red-billed buffalo weaver and a crested barbet, a couple of drongos. There must be some termites here on the ground. Anyway, Ross has picked up from the Mala Mala Facebook page that there are only 5 pups in this pack's den, which is that's a very small number, and that it is indeed the half-tail pack. And the half-tail pack, I didn't notice it in that particular pack, but there is an individual with a very short tail and another one with a floppy ear. I think I was just too excited to take particular note of the individuals in that magnificent little dog pack that we saw. So thanks very much for that, Ross. Half-tail pack, only 5 puppies on Mala Mala. 5 is a very small number. Look, you know, when there are 10 adults like that, it's not a bad thing, because it means that those 5 will probably have a better chance of survival. It just doesn't leave much room for error should a disease come through or something like that. Can we just have a quick look at that drongo there, Vian, if you don't mind? See a fork-tailed drongo, and he's attempting to do the call very badly of the white-browed scrub robin. Just listen to him. There he is. You can also hear a woodpecker knocking away. parrots in the background. There. That's the drongo trying to do the robin call. There's a dove behind us. The light is just so magnificent when the clouds kind of open up a bit. There's a lovely softness to the light that you don't normally get this time of year, time of the day. There he goes. That's not his ideal kind of form of feeding, you know. The drongo will normally hawk insects from a perch, and that means they'll catch insects in the air rather than kind of pick them off the ground like the hornbills and the red-billed buffalo weavers. There's another red-billed buffalo weaver there. And of course the crested barbet will do. There he is, the red-billed buffalo weaver. And of course the most obvious thing about them is their enormous nests that always sit on the northwestern side of a tree. I'll try and find you one. And while we watch these birds eating, picking up insects and things, Marianne has commented from Boston. She's greeted me very fondly and asked me if I've had my seeds for breakfast yet. Marianne, unlike the birds, I'm able to go to the shops and buy my seeds and cook them for myself. I haven't had my breakfast yet. I'm going to have it when I get back. Although it is making me very peckish watching VM munching down on his granola bars and things. He hasn't offered me anything, I have to tell you. He's got a massive array of food here and he hasn't once offered me even a small piece of any of it. Anyway, we're going to press on. The red-billed buffalo weaver, magnificent bird, lives in flats on the northwestern side of a tree, and I'm going to show you the red-billed buffalo weaver's nest if I can. If you are lost in the wilderness and there is no sun, and I always find it amazing how incredibly easy it is in an area like this without landmarks. If you can't see the mountains and if there's no sun, it's actually quite easy to get totally disorientated and lost. And the red-billed buffalo weaver's nest is quite a good way of finding where you are, because it's always on the northwestern side of a tree. All right, we're going to go back to Scott. He's managed to find himself some signal, and I think he's found himself a herd of enjoyable animals as well. I'll see you just now.
Welcome back, everyone, and apologies for my break in signal earlier. Not sure what happened there. You can see a mass of buffalo slowly making their way towards us, and we are in for a treat as we are at the Buffalo's Hook waterhole, and in the next few moments hundreds of buffalo are about to descend on us, and it's going to make for an incredible sighting. So get ready with your screenshots. And we looped around the block while we were waiting for them to approach the waterhole, and didn't find anything of major interest along the way. There were tracks of male lions to the east of us that may well have caught wind of these buffalo, but there was no sign of them following. Earlier on, when we were showing you a different view of the waterhole, Joyce noticed some ripples, and there's a number of different fish species that live in these waterholes, mainly catfish and tilapia though. So they could have been responsible for the bubbles, but there are also just a lot of small bubbles coming up from any movement that happens from the fish under the water. So it's a lot of just bubbles rising up. And here come the first buffalo, poking out just to the left of the screen. And there's going to be a lot of excitement as they get to the water's edge. They are also going to be a bit cautious. But it's going to be a great opportunity to see how many buffalo are actually in this herd. And once they've assessed that there are no threats or danger in the area, they are going to come rolling in. What a beautiful morning. Look at those reflections. And here come the buffalo. Look at this. We've literally got our two front tires in the water to try and get you the lowest angle possible. And it certainly seems to be working. This is wonderful. I think the buffalo at the back of the herd are now realizing that there is water up ahead, and they're beginning to increase their intensity, and look at how many there are. It was hard for you to get an idea earlier in the thick vegetation, and I'd say probably only a third of the herd is here, if that. There's no sign of any hippo in the waterhole today. It would have been interesting to see the hippo's response to all of these visitors. What a wonderful scene, and look at all the ripples the herd are churning up. It was earlier on as flat as glass, and aren't we lucky to have been able to witness the contrast in scenery from this waterhole when it was quiet and peaceful just a few moments ago. It would be very interesting to be able to calculate how many liters are consumed by this herd at this sitting. It will be into the thousands. If each was to drink at least 10 liters, I would say it wouldn't be an unlikely estimate per buffalo. And there are hundreds of them. And they still continue to stream in from the thick vegetation in the background. And slowly they are filling up this dam. with their carcasses, I guess. They're not filling it up with water, that's for certain. They are drinking all the water, but thankfully this waterhole still does have quite a lot of water. Now, we've all been tasked with a request from our friend James on the other vehicle, and he would like us to try and count how many buffalo are here. Now, that's going to be a tricky task, but what I suggest we do is, if we count about 10 individuals, and then just keep bouncing through the herd using that size or rough size of where you would see 10, and just multiply it through the herd, we may get a rough estimate. Whew. I got to about 200 and then I stopped counting, but if anybody does feel that they are mathematically gifted and have the ability to accurately count all these individuals, I commend you and look forward to your statistics. Absolutely awesome, a wall of buffalo in front of us. I would guess that there's easily 200 here, but there are still more approaching from the vegetation. Nikki says she's on 170 something. She's been counting individually. I've gone for a collective group count. It's been so awesome that we got to see the first one come down to drink, and now we can see how many there actually are. And like I said, more are still streaming in from the east, the direction they've come from. The amount of birds following this herd really is impressive. Drongos and starlings and oxpeckers, all benefiting from these buffalo, in that either the oxpeckers get to feed on them, on the ticks. There's some oxpeckers there we can see on the backs of the buffalo. And look at that one female, she's got very, very wide horns. And the one next to her has got no horns in the middle. The one golden colored buffalo, she's got a very distinctly light coat. She's a blonde. And next to it, sadly, that poor old lady's got no horns left. All shapes and sizes in this herd. And isn't it interesting that there's that golden colored individual? And I believe Jamie also saw the no-horned female yesterday. It would be interesting to know how exactly she lost those horns. I'm guessing it was a combination of age and possibly an infestation of horned borer moths. Well, this is a kind of scene that we don't get to share with you very often. And I remember the first time I got to share a sighting with the breeding herd of buffalo was at this very waterhole. There was a crocodile in the waterhole at that stage, and it was slinking amongst them. I thought it was trying to possibly snipe a young calf, but it didn't try and do that. But that was months ago, and it's good to be back at the same place, but showing a very different scene now. It's a lot drier now. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to allow Andrew to pan around. I'm going to keep quiet. There's so much awesome noise coming from all the birds and the buffalo. So take a moment to enjoy the sounds from Buffalo's Hook Waterhole. Well, aren't we also lucky to be witnessing this spectacle in front of us? The tip, 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 tip noise that you can hear is a blacksmith lapwing. And it's a big reason why it's got its name, due to its call. It sounds like a blacksmith working on an anvil. And it's obviously not happy with all these buffalo around here, and it's letting off its alarm call. It won't have chicks at this time of the year, it's highly unlikely, but when they do, and when they do nest on the ground, large herds of buffalo like this can often come up against very protective parents, and they'll stand in front of their nest with their wings open, trying to prevent the buffaloes from standing on them, and most of the time it will actually work. It's hard to believe, but there still are more buffalo approaching from the bush. but have yet to even have a drink. Well, good to know that one of our viewers is tuning in all the way from Brooklyn. Morning, Lev. Good to have you with us. Lev has asked a couple of questions, one of which is, if the herd of buffalo were to be startled by predators and stampeded off, would the young not be trampled? And yes, they certainly do run a risk of being trampled in a stampede. But with most of the herbivores, they are quite good at learning how to run and walk within just hours of being alive. And if those don't learn to do that quick enough, they will become statistics. But that certainly is a risk for the smaller buffalo. But usually the adults will try their best to encompass all of the youngsters in the middle of the herd and keep the older, bigger buffaloes out around the periphery to try and protect them. But that certainly could happen, Lev, when the herd does stampede. And another question that Lev's asked is that she's surprised that during our winter months the waterholes would dry up because it shouldn't be hot enough for evaporation to occur. And Lev, it can get quite warm here during the days, up to 30 degrees on a warm winter's day, and it's very, very hot and dry, and for months on end we will not get rain. So the waterholes naturally will dry up because of all the animals drinking, as well as evaporation. This one I think will make it through till the rainy season, but Treehouse Dam and Twin Dams, two of our other waterholes, as well as Djuma Dam, may well dry up before the next rains, which, to be honest, will be good for what we do, because it will mean that the animals will concentrate at what few water sources remain. So it will definitely make our lives a little bit easier. When there's water everywhere, the animals can spread out, making it harder for us to find them. Okay, well, got some great news. We've got some numbers through from some of you who have counted. Ron said he counted 368. And Donna said 402. Christy got 425. And Purple Rain 384. So anywhere between 350 and 400, 450 buffalo, a very large herd. And well done, and thank you for counting and sending through those figures to us. I think John sent through a comment saying that he heard the same herd was seen on Chitwa. Chitwa, which is another property close to us. The Strongos are having a little bath here. Isn't this wonderful? And they estimated the herd to be about 400 strong. So that's good enough for me. 400 buffalo. And let's say they drank 10 liters each. That would be 4,000 liters, 4 tons of water. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the pathfinders, the ladies who are in charge of determining where the herd heads, have evidently decided to continue in their general direction of movement, which has been north and west. So if they continue like this, they will cross into Buffalo's Hook shortly. But at least we have got to spend a wonderful morning with them, and to see them arriving at this waterhole really was an awesome thing to see. Now, Dave in Toronto, morning and welcome on board with us. Dave's noticed that these buffalo haven't been hugely aggressive with one another, even though there was a lot of them in a very concentrated area. And that's fairly typical of buffalo. They're used to spending long periods of times in close quarters with one another, both feeding on grass and drinking. So they're typically quite peaceful with one another, but occasionally the bulls will chase one another around, or a bull that's trying to get frisky with a female may get chased off by that female. But typically they're quite calm and placid animals. That is until, of course, a lion possibly takes down a member of their herd. Then they rally their troops, come in and try and chase the lion off. There they can be very aggressive, but usually amongst themselves they are completely relaxed and all just kind of squeeze in and make a plan around one another. Well, we've mentioned earlier that there's a lot of birds following this large herd of buffalo. Oxpeckers, and I didn't specify that they were mainly the red-billed oxpeckers that we are seeing. And Simone is asking if I haven't seen any yellow-billed oxpeckers. They're slightly bigger, the more robust bill, and there's a lot more yellow on the bill than the red-billed. But sadly, I have yet to see any. There is a chance that there are one or two that we haven't seen. But I sadly haven't noticed any yellow-billed oxpeckers. They sometimes do. Well, it's more likely to find them on the larger herds of buffalo. And can you believe it, there are still more buffalo only reaching the water for the first time now. A few of the big old bulls trailing at the back of the herd. Having said that, though, there are one or two females amongst them. Well, it'll be interesting to see when these buffalo take their next drink. And Sherry's just asked, how often do they need to actually drink? And probably every 3 days would be the maximum that they could go without drinking, but they will drink every day if it is possible. And in this area, there certainly is enough water around for them to drink daily, possibly even twice daily. But if they were in dire conditions and it was a much drier time of the year with less water around, they would be able to survive 2 or 3 days comfortably before needing to have their next drink. So it's kind of, I guess, like us as humans, we can have 3 meals a day is what we like to do, but if push comes to shove, we could go for days without feeding. We could go for longer without food than water, though. That's important to mention. As a lot of us have sufficient reserves of fat to keep us going, but without water, we would perish. Now, we don't see many large herds of buffalo, so we don't chat too much about them, and it's a great now that we're getting a lot of questions through, so thanks for sending them. The next one's from Exaranga, and they're interested to know if the possible large, or a possible theory for seeing such a large herd together is that they are concentrating together to search for diminishing food resources, and I don't think that's the case. I think the reason why we are seeing this herd now is simply because there hasn't been a lot of buffalo movement here over the summer months, and they've exhausted resources elsewhere and now come here in search of, like I said, untapped resources that buffalo have yet to feed on. So we haven't had many buffalo herds, and I'm fairly certain this herd stays a very similar size throughout the year. It's not uncommon, though, for herds to join up with others, but a herd of this size could well continue to stay as is throughout the year. It's just we may not see them, and they move elsewhere further north of us into the Manyaleti. And if anything, during drier, harsher times, you would find herds possibly fragmenting, therefore not competing with many other buffalo when they are feeding. So as food shortages increase, buffalo herds or any herds of animals could fragment so that they are not competing with large numbers for food. It's interesting, the individuals that are arriving now are mainly bulls, but there are also some old females who are, I guess, getting old and therefore trailing the herd. And I'm told a lot of you have been snapping away and getting some wonderful screenshots, so happy to hear your photography session has been good. So many red-billed oxpeckers sitting on the backs of the buffalo. I'm hoping to find a yellow-billed, but oh, hang on, I think I've just seen a yellow-billed. I think I have. Andrew, The one that's drinking a bit to the right, stay zoomed in. On that back of that buffalo, there's a yellow-billed oxpecker. The one that's facing us, it's just behind the horn. Is it that one? Yeah, it is that one. It's difficult to see. No, Andrew, to the right, the one that's I can't see where I am now on the monitor. Okay, no, to the left slightly. Stop there for a sec. It's hard to see, we can't zoom in more. Let's try and drive a little bit closer. Let's drive closer. It's going to be an awkward angle, but we're going to go for it. I'm fairly certain there's a yellow-billed oxpecker there. Okay, like I said, the angle's going to be awkward, but it's necessary for us to try and get a bit closer. Okay, Andrew, the one that's facing directly away from us. Okay, there we go. On that back is a yellow-billed oxpecker.
Oh yes, it is too.
Wonderful. That's the first yellow-billed oxpecker I think we've ever seen since filming here. And even though it does have red on the end of its beak, it does have a large portion of yellow on the initial part of the beak, and it's just the end that's a red tip, and there's a red-billed oxpecker next to it now. You'll notice the red-billed. Let's try and get a bit closer. Oh, sorry, Buff. We just need to squeeze past here. Oh no, has it flown off, Andrew? I think we may have lost it.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to find the yellow-billed again. It's dodged us. Where have you gone, yellow-billed? I'm scanning around, trying to find where it may have gone, but can't seem to see it anywhere. Well, I'm sure some of you may have got a glimpse. And what we're going to do is we're going to stay, and if we do find it again, we'll call you back. But James has found something that he would like to show you. So we're going to send you across to another large animal of Africa and see you a little bit later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Jiga. You find us here close to Galago Camp in the presence of the same herd of elephants that I was with yesterday. And I'm very pleased to see them because, you know, it's very seldom that we get to spend extended periods with the same herd, and the ability to then discern dynamics becomes possible, which you can't really do unless you spend extended periods with them. Now what I'm looking for, remember yesterday we had, for those of you who were with us, there was an interaction between two young bulls who were fighting with each other. They were quite playful. And then two bit older ones, sort of teenagers. And the one was bullying the other, and he actually managed to cut the skin on the back left end of the younger one. He had the older one, the bully, had two fairly long tusks, and he did some damage. And I'm just trying to see if I can find that one. We haven't found him yet. they've just had their drink. They like to come here because there's a little fresh water hole where they can come and get some freshly pumped water. They don't like the dirty stuff, elephants. If they can find fresh water, they'll find it. And often, in fact, even if it's available, muddy water is available in pans, they'll dig through the riverbeds, through the sandy riverbeds, and you often find holes where they've been digging to get at the fresh water. I've seen human beings do the same thing in this area. There he is there. One drinking there. Yeah. Don't worry to go on to him yet. I'm sure he'll come past. So everybody, I've spotted the one that was slightly injured yesterday. Now, he's certainly not severely injured at all. But that's him there in picture now on your left-hand side. With a one-tusked cow. I think she's a cow. Might be a bull. Lost her tusk somehow, probably feeding. Yeah, it's actually a young bull. He's lost his tusk. Like having his teeth knocked out. You can just see the scratch on the left-hand side of the backside of that one coming towards us. It's not particularly impressive, but it's quite a nice way of identifying him. And he's just coming to have a look. And as is typical in this herd so far, from what we've observed, youngsters, young bulls, always just lurking on the outsides, while the rest, the very little ones, and the mothers go in to feed. Now that tusk was probably lost feeding, so he would have broken it off perhaps. I suspect there was probably some sort of disease involved, that would have, or an abscess that would have perhaps made it a bit weak. So nice when they approach us like this. He's definitely coming to have a look at us. The young bulls will do this. We're just going to try and count the toes. Even at this stage, they often only have three nails left. Hello, fella. That's so wonderful. He's come specifically over, basically, to say hi. Now, we did have a question the other day about how many toes they have. We know beyond doubt that they have 5 on the front and 4 on the back. The confusion that arises, it arises from the fact that they tend to lose their nails fairly soon. So when they're born, they've got 5 nails on the front and 4 on the back, but they tend to lose those nails as they get older. So often it's only 3 on the front and maybe 1 on the back. And certainly in the tracks, that's all that shows up. They've definitely got 4 and 5 toes. Funny, in the young males of all species, just about, are the most fun to be around in the bush, and that's because they're just like the young of male humans. They're just testing themselves. They're quite inquisitive about the world, and they're quite, they're just being imbued with that sense of testosterone, where they're just going to challenge what's going on around the place. So the young male leopard, they'll often stand when you're on foot. They don't run away, which is quite fun. You get young bull elephants that will come and investigate, like that one did just there. I'm just going to do a little turn around here. A notable exception being Junior of the Nkahuma pride, who doesn't seem to do much investigating unless there's food in the offing. So I guess can be pretty standard of some teenagers as well. That one there, I think that's the bull that did the damage yesterday. see the bull who's just excluded his friend. And they're eating something called Peltiforum africanum, or the toilet paper tree. I don't actually believe it's ever been used as toilet paper. I think it just comes from the very soft leaves that it has. Now that young bull there with those tusks, he was the one that scraped the youngster yesterday. He's a bit of a bully, as you can see. And because of that, his time in the herd is limited. Cows won't tolerate him for much longer. They'll eventually just toss him out. You know, I find sitting with elephants like this, it's very important to realize that they are always to be respected enormously. We don't know exactly what might make them feel uncomfortable or what might make them be ornery one day, but you know, so a few years ago, like I've said to you, a few of you before, we couldn't get anything like this close to elephants. You didn't go into a Kruger elephant sighting unless it was in reverse, or unless you had an absolute definite forward escape route so that you could start the car and drive away quickly, because they were just so upset with people. Now the trust has been built over the years, and to the extent that, I mean, these elephants hardly reacted to us as we came in, which is wonderful to see, but you always treat them with extreme respect and extreme care. Try and read their behavior and just get a general sense of how they're feeling, because they definitely project how they're feeling into the atmosphere around them. I mean, I don't really know how else to define it, other than to say it's some sort of extrasensory way of communication, which I think that they have. Shall we try and go a little bit down there? Would that be a better angle for you?
I'll try anything.
Okay, he'll try anything, will he? I hope you heard that, everyone. Viam says he will try anything. It's certainly true with food today. I think I'm going to start calling Viam Jr. Hello, Maggie on Twitter. You want to know why the elephants lose their toes. Remember, they don't lose the toe, they just lose the nail, and it's just from use, you know. It's walking barefoot all their years in and around some fairly rough terrain, and I think the toenails just fall off. Drive very slowly in here, just make sure that no trust is disturbed. Hello, Anne in Germany. Sorry, Viam, I didn't mean to do that. Anne in Germany, you are a new viewer and you are most welcome. And you say you've made an apology for not knowing much about African wildlife. Anne, there's no apology required. That is why we are here. And that's what the whole point of this wonderful concept of a live safari is to take the wonders of Africa to the rest of the world and take the information. I don't want to use the word teach because it sounds a bit lectury, but absolutely to take the wonders and I suppose teach the beautiful things that we see out here and teach you about the animals and wildlife and landscapes that we have in this beautiful wilderness area. And you want to know basically how do we tell bull elephants from cow elephants, and it's not as simple as it might seem. I mean, I still make mistakes from a distance. You say we seem to be able to do it from a distance. You can. There are a few things to look out for, Anne. And as you spend more and more time with us, what you'll notice is that the cows have a very square front of the head. So they've got a very kind of angular forehead. The bulls tend to be a little more rounded than that. Then the other thing to look out for is that bulls, especially mature ones, tend to have a much more sort of hollow back. So they've got a much more pronounced lordosis in the back, whereas the cows tend to be a lot straighter down the spine. Another thing to look out for, and this isn't often, I've often made a mistake using this particular way of telling, is that the cows have got straighter, thinner tusks than the bulls. The bulls tend to have fatter and more curved tusks that point towards the front as opposed to down towards the ground. So those are three ways that you can tell. The other way, of course, is to tell that if a cow has had babies before, if she's had calves, she would generally have fairly large mammary glands, and they hang in between the front legs, which gives them a sometimes sort of disturbingly humanoid look, I find. The bulls do have two mammary glands there, but they obviously don't produce milk, and so they're much smaller than those on the female. So, and here comes a young bull. And you can tell he's a young bull because now the difficulty there is that he's got pretty straight, skinny tusks. But that's definitely a young bull. And he's been lurking, he's the bit of a bully of the herd at the moment. He's been lurking at the back of the herd, and you can see that swagger with which he walked. That's very common of young bulls like this. And he's probably about to come into what we call must. Now, his first must. And must in bulls is their time of breeding. Their testosterone levels go through the roof. They start to produce an evil-smelling green slime from their nether regions, which tends to give away that they are in must, and that attracts the females. I don't know why, because it's pretty offensive smelling. And when they get to about his age, he's probably pushing 17, 18 years, and they go into must for a short time to start with. And then when they get older, must can last up to a year in some of the really old bulls. He'll be very lucky to get a mating opportunity at his current size, though. He's not very big. I mean, compared with us, he's enormous, but he's he's by no means a fully mature bull yet. But those tusks are pretty big for an 18-year-old or 17-year-old elephant, so he might have a fairly impressive set by the time he's a big bull. And if you look carefully, now you can see his tusks do point a little bit forward. And Wiem, if we can just go back to his elbow underneath his leg there. Now, if that was a cow, you'd be able to see his mammary glands quite nicely there. You can just make out a sort of nipple there, which is typical of the males. They do have them, but they're not swollen in that area like the cows tend to be. We're just going to head back to Scott. I'm going to stay with these elephants for the next little while. Scott's just going to give you an update on the retreating herd of buffalo and perhaps on that yellow-billed oxpecker. I hope he's managed to find it. That was a spectacular thing to have seen in this particular area. So we'll nip back to Scott, and I will see you in just a little while.
Welcome back, everyone, and hard to believe that there were 400 buffalo. This was the corner of the waterhole where they were drinking earlier, and as you can see now, there is just about nothing more to see here. Sadly, we didn't get a view of another yellow-billed oxpecker, but what I would like to show you is in the book, the quick difference between them for those of you who may not have got a good view. So below is the red-billed oxpecker. It's got a prominent yellow ring around its eye, as well as an almost entirely red beak. Now if we look up to the yellow-billed oxpecker, it's got half yellow, half red. So you may have noticed that on the last one, and lacks the bright yellow eye ring. So we don't see many of those around, and it's the first one that I've managed to share with any of you. So it's certainly a new bird for the bird lists, and if you have yet to start a bird list, we're watching you, and it's worth starting one soon, because it is a great way to learn the different birds, get enthused by the fact that there's more than just the big hairy animals out here. So also you can just keep track of how many you have seen with us. What I would like to show now is the blacksmith lapwings, though, the birds that we heard calling out. They've calmed down now that the buffalo have moved off and are enjoying feeding on an array of insects that have either been left behind by the buffalo or been attracted to all the dung that they've left behind. There's also a little three-banded plover on the right of your screen. Interesting, the blacksmith lapwings used to be called plovers, but the names have changed, and it's only the very small plovers that have remained plovers, and the larger ones became lapwings. Wonderful. Sounds like you've been having a great sighting of the elephant with James, and we are going to send you back to James with the elephant, and we're going to continue on and see what else we can find. Enjoy. We'll see you later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to this magnificent drongo sighting. You can see a beautiful fork-tailed drongo there, and in the background, of course, a magnificent herd of elephants. Attended by the drongo. Drongo is patiently waiting for any kind of invertebrate that might be kicked up into the air, and it'll then be hawked away. It's the same young bull we were looking at just now, and he's macerating a young knobthorn tree which has come to a rather sticky end rather prematurely, I'm afraid. Hello Lola in Norwich in Ohio. I think we're saying this name of your town correctly. You want to know how old is a cow when she first gives birth? Well, Lola, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it is potentially from about 9 years. So that's quite young. A 9-year-old elephant is not big, but potentially they can mate and give birth, well, 2 years later, say, when they're about 11. So they can breed when they're about 9. And their gestation period, of course, is about 2 years, which is a long time. And so 2 years later, she'll give birth. And the bulls tend to be a bit later than that. You know, potentially sexually mature from about 17 or 18 years. But if a female comes into estrus and a big bull gets wind of it, it's highly unlikely that a youngster like the one we're looking at now would manage to breed before he got his I like to use the term pipes cleaned. Basically, he'll just get himself bashed by any mature bull that comes into the area. It'll be a must bull, so in a heightened stage of testosterone and sort of aggression, and that's basically what will happen. So potentially from 18 years, probably don't breed until they're about 25 though. I'm just reminding me there to get my fat bonce out of the way so that you can watch the elephants, not the back of my head. That one is eating something called a red spikethorn, or is it? Is that a spikethorn? I think it's a spikethorn tree, and they are very tannin rich. So you'll see he's picking at it with fairly long teeth. And they'll move on quite soon. It's so interesting, you know, the plants that taste bad to us clearly taste bad to them as well. Now, this is interesting. Just pull back here, Vian, if you don't mind. That bull has just backed off because of the cow that you saw on the left-hand side of your screen there. That big cow there came through. I don't think she's the matriarch. I think it's either her or another one with the longer tusks. That's the matriarch. But this cow is definitely one of the senior cows in the herd. And the bull, as soon as she came through that bush, he backed off quite fast. So he's obviously been shouted at a few times and wants to avoid incurring her wrath again. Knobthorn is now a thing of the past. Little seedling that managed to grow beyond the trials of getting past the grass and the other seedlings. Thought it was on its way, and then that elephant just came and plucked it from existence. Look, that thing's eating zebra wood. So the big cow there is eating something called zebra wood, or Dalbergia melanoxylon, for those of you who are vaguely interested in that. And those thorns that she is now ruffling around in her tongue will go through a Land Rover tyre. So quite how she's able to not do herself any damage, I really don't know. She's obviously got to be fairly careful. And what you'll find probably is that the best tasting stuff is probably quite thorny. Most of the greenery that you can still see around here is of trees that have very powerful chemical deterrents to animals that might want to eat them. Tannins and various other aromatic substances and chemicals that make them taste pretty foul. And the zebra wood, of course, has that huge thorns on it, and that's to deter predators. So, you know, the predators remember that a herbivore is a predator of sorts, in that it preys upon vegetation, and so that's basically one of the strategies, is to have a huge number of thorns, and that's supposed to put potential predators off. But clearly, in the case of that elephant, not doing a very good job. Viam's just turned across to some nyala that have come across to the waterhole to have a drink. It's a very peaceful little scene as the breeze picks up. The temperature certainly hasn't warmed up a huge amount. I think it's a bit more than 7 degrees now. It's probably sitting at around 14. Back to the elephants. It's another zebra wood, taking a pasting there. And there she's eating some, that's interesting. That cow is now eating something called a gardenia tree. Is it a gardenia or is it a papia? William?
Yeah.
Gardenia or Papia capensis?
Gee, James. No idea.
It actually looks like a jacket plum. It's a jacket plum or Papia capensis, not a gardenia tree. And I haven't seen them eat them before. There's definitely no thorns on that tree. She's voraciously having a go at it. I wonder how much she'll eat. You'll probably find there's some sort of chemical defense there. The jacket plum tree is supposed to produce an oil that cures baldness in human beings, but I've so far failed to make it use. Hello, Joan. We just were talking earlier about the sort of the youngster, that bull now who's in, no, not that bull, sorry, the bull that we were looking at earlier who is a bit of a bully. And Joan, you want to know if his mother is actually in this herd. Joan, his mum will definitely be in this herd unless something untoward has happened. So he will grow up in his natal herd until he's about 18, and then he'll be thrown out of his sort of natal herd. And so his mum will definitely be around here. The other big cows will be his cousins and aunts. One of them may well, I mean, that big cow who he backed off from could well be his mum. Very sweet little one there, trying to find a way to use his trunk and feed himself. 2 years it takes for them to learn to use that trunk. Thousands of different muscle fibers and nerve fibers and bits and pieces of lateral and horizontal muscle and circular muscles. They're the only vertebrate that have circular muscles. So it's an extremely complicated organ to learn to use. We sneak down the hill a bit, Ben. Are you happy here?
No.
We're just going to go a little bit down the road here. You know, you try and make the cameraman part of the team, and he just hits you with one word answers in between mouthfuls of picnic that he's managed to bring for himself. I'll just go past here, if that's all right. I don't want to put you out at all. All right? I'm sure there's a huge amount of teaching going on, you know. There's such a huge suite of things to eat out here. And I'm pretty sure that in some way that we're probably not aware, the youngsters are being taught by the slightly older ones as to what's good to eat and what isn't. Now that one is eating more knobthorn, which is an acacia tree, and you can see that the tree was pushed over some time back and is now being feasted upon. There's a young cow. It's being a little bit ornery. Sorry, my girl, I didn't mean to get in your way. And it does make the blood start to move quite fast when they come up like that. But she's a youngish cow, so I wouldn't be too worried by it. If one of the older cows sort of shook her head at that distance, I'd be inclined to move out of the way fairly fast. spotted, Jan?
What is a vula? What does it mean?
We spotted some tracks on the ground, hoping it was mvula, but it is in fact a hyena. It's a very nice, peaceful scene here as the mid-morning starts to sort of comes to fruition and our little game drive draws to a close. The other thing about elephants is that you can smell them so nicely. They have a very distinctive, leathery, elephantine smell. It's like a sweet leather smell. Hello, Deb in Ohio. That's a very clever question you've asked while we watch these elephants wander off down this drainage line. You want to know, basically, you say you can understand why there might be some competition within a species for food or territorial disputes within a species. And you want to know between species, would there be disputes over food or territory or something like that? Deb, the way evolution tends to work is that any niche that is empty, it will generally be filled up. And an empty niche basically means an unexploited resource, be it a spatial resource, a trophic resource, trophic meaning feeding, or a temporal resource, so when it's best to be active. And that really does kind of mean that competition between species is kept to a minimum. But that said, you know, as soon as things get dry, animals can compete with each other. So, for example, buffalo and zebra might compete for grazing. Would it ever result in conflict, physical conflict? Probably not. I've definitely seen elephants, though, chase other animals off water. So there may be conflict over water between species. Probably not. I haven't seen elephants chase other elephants away, but I've seen them chase rhino off water. I've seen them chase buffalo off water. So a resource that is shared, something like water, which is of course crucial, especially as we go into the drier parts of the season, could certainly induce inter-specific competition as opposed to intra. And then a lot of things, you know, things like most of the herbivores are not in fact territorial, strictly territorial, and they definitely don't have territorial battles with, you know, outside of their own species. Right, so these elephants are wandering off down the drainage line. We're going to just loop around. We'll probably get one more view of them before we leave you. And let's just try. We'll drive around the top of them. While we're doing that, we'll pop across to Scott, see what he's up to. He does sound to have had a rather marvellous morning. I would love to have seen that herd of buffalo. That said, we did have the incredible pack of wild dogs. So we'll just nip across to Scott, and I'll see you just now.
Welcome back, everyone. I'll take a closer look. That's a beautiful bird called an orange-breasted bushshrike. I hope it turns to face us again. Let me try and get a little bit closer. Oh no, there we go. There we go, that's working, kind of. There you can see a little bright orange throat patch from time to time as it flitters through these bushes. I do want to just try and get a little bit closer to try and get one last view of it for you. There we go. Wonderful. What a pretty bird. And speaking of pretty birds, we've got a question through from Genevieve, and she would like to know, when could we expect to see the violet-backed starlings again? They're an intra-African migrant, so they migrate within Africa. And we can expect to have them returning anytime from October. So still a few months we're going to have to wait, Genevieve, before we see the violet-backed starling. But what I would like to do is show you a picture of this beautiful bird. For those of you who don't know it, and something to look forward to. It's going to arrive with probably around another 200 birds that migrate into this area. And it's got an incredibly beautiful coloration, especially when, like most starlings, the sunlight is shining on them. They iridesce wonderfully. So Genevieve, you're going to have to stick around until October if you'd like to see the violet-backed starling. And like I said, probably around 200 other birds that will migrate back. Some not only from within Africa, some will come from as far as Russia. Hard to believe, but there's some incredible feats that go on in nature, and migration is one of them. What a morning it's been. It's been so good having you all with us, and good to hear a few new viewers join in on this sunrise safari. A big thanks to Andrew and his nifty camera work, as well as to Nikki and Kirsty in the final control room. And we're going to send you back to James for the last few minutes to enjoy that herd of Ellies, and we will see you all a little bit later.
Where's your Hi everybody. These these elephants have just come down off a fairly precipitous bank down into this drainage line, and it's just between Gallagher Camp and Voyatella Camp, and quite close to Gari waterhole. This is the drainage line that feeds the waterhole at Gari Dam. And it's amazing how agile they are. You know, that's a pretty steep bank, and it's incredible how such a vast animal, who's seemingly so sort of inept at movement, is able to walk up and down a bank like that. I suspect they'll probably wander off just now and have perhaps another drink at Gari Waterhole, although that's probably what they were doing at Gallagher. So it's been a marvellous, marvellous morning, and I thank you very much for your patience. It wasn't very easy to get into that wild dog sighting, but they were very kind to us, those other rangers. You know, they made a space for us, and it was incredible to get in there and just have a quick look at the half-tailed pack. 5 babies apparently. Thank you for that information, I think from Ross. And then we came through here, had a marvellous time with some elephants, and had some beautiful light all over the Lowveld down through to the mountains that lead up to the Highveld. A big thank you to VM, the picnic, the wildebeest. That's his thumb there. He's so full now he can barely speak. Thanks to Nikki and Kirsty in the final control, to Jamie, who I think was out looking for animals, to the inimitable Scott and Andrew on the other vehicle, and of course to Alex and Eugene, who do remarkable things with the satellites, radios and various other things that make this thing possible. So thank you very much. Beautiful morning, chilly day. We'll see you this afternoon for the afternoon safari. Please join us then, and have a great day.